Well, good morning, everybody. What a rich feast we are having here. I am a little bit annoyed with Roger, really, for giving me the title that he has, because it has felt really deep and costly in preparing this. And I feel as though God has given me, even if it's a micro moment of understanding as to how he feels towards the brokenness in our cities. When I first started thinking about this subject, it really struck me that cities do, of course, have personalities. I know of a wonderful artist, he's not that well known, called Carl Hagelund. He's an American. And you'll see here is one of his images where he draws cities. But what he does is that he doesn't paint literally. He tries to pick up the spiritual tone through colour. He tries to represent the cultural nature, the voice, the dance of a city. And here is actually New York that is depicted. We just need but look around our own respective cities to know that they do indeed have different personalities. I mean, I'm going to pick on you, Steve, and just say Newcastle, for example. It's defined by a deep-rooted regional warmth, profound civic intimacy, a celebratory spirit. And Rog, I'm going to pick on you and say Manchester. By contrast, it could be argued that Manchester is characterised by a fierce, global-facing swagger, radical intellect, and relentless drive for cultural and musical innovation. I thought you'd like that. But these cultural characteristics are formed not just in the huge successes of cities, but most importantly in the struggle, in the oppression, in what they have faced that has caused people pain. It struck me actually when Roger said yesterday that these things are actually cyclical. Every 300 or 400 years, you can see a shift in trend. You can see a shift, be that politics, be that in terms of how a city is doing financially, abundance or scarcity. And I'm going to use very evangelical language now, dependent on the powers and the principalities that is evident in a city, as we read about in Ephesians 6:12. There are seats of power that are formed across our cities. Theologian Walter Wink describes cities as having a spiritual corporate personality. Let's just look at Nineveh. Its spiritual posture is ruthless, aggressive, violent, yet surprisingly capable of sudden and collective repentance. Sodom and Gomorrah, inherently hostile, inhospitable, deeply abusive to the vulnerable. Antioch reminds me a bit of Bristol or Reading. Innovative, diverse, generous, and highly adaptable. The birthplace of the term Christian. On it goes. But really what I want to draw out to get into this talk is this. It's how Jesus interacts with cities that I find fascinating. He doesn't talk to individuals. He talks to the city as an entire singular entity. In Matthew 11, he openly reprimands cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, Capernaum. They witnessed his miracles. They felt his goodness. But as a collective community, they remained utterly indifferent. Pergamum. Jesus notes that this is where Satan has his throne. I live in London. I might argue that that is at times how I feel about London. Satan has a throne there. This is Jesus identifying this. We've got to understand that our cities have these personalities and that Jesus' approach to them was not just that they had a spiritual personality. Jesus spoke because he understood that they had corporate responsibility. That's the difference. Every city is spoken to as though it has corporate responsibility. Now just think now about your city. If we do not understand the spiritual temperature, if we don't understand how our city got to be how it is, if we don't understand what it is that has been formed, how can we strategically pray? How can we be intellectual about our praying? How can we be so broken in our praying so that it reaches the heavens? You know, when Dave King held up his book yesterday, I wanted to run onto the stage. I wanted to run onto the stage to grab it off him, to say, do you know how important this book is? And he's such a humble guy. All he did was kind of go, oh, and I've been told to mention. Right? Dave, we honor you for what you are doing. There is something so profound about being men and women who understand where those thrones of Satan are, who understand the personality so that we can breathe the Spirit of God in and break disunifying powers and principalities. Corporate responsibility. Corporate responsibility. We just look at Jesus standing over Jerusalem, right? Weeping. He doesn't say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, and only the believers within. He says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill prophets and stone those sent to you. How often have I longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you, Jerusalem, were not willing. Family, we are handed the baton by Jesus to take corporate responsibility for our city, the place we claim as home. The place where I add my brokenness to. How can I criticize the city that I live when I have brought it my brokenness and abdicate? But I also bring my goodness. And I am just but one of millions living in London. The task I acknowledge is huge to bring unity where it is disunified. The task is huge. And what does that rise in us? Does it, in one sense, call out in us a retreat? Too big, too huge, can't do it, somebody else will. I'm going to abdicate or procrastinate. Or am I going to be one of those who activates or indeed dominate? For us to take corporate responsibility, to do something against the wave of disunity, we are going to have to finally recognize that no one person, no one church, no local cabinet, politician, CEO, charity, business person, healthcare provider, leader, nor lay person has the sole solution to a unified city. Every single person needs to take their role in unifying. There are two powerful ancient Hebrew words found in Isaiah. These two words are fascinating. There's a word play going on in Isaiah, looking at two diametrically opposed realities. Isaiah tells us that God is looking for tzedakah. Can we have the next slide, please? Tzedakah is justice. It is righteousness. It's the act of doing right by the vulnerable. It's life-giving, it's fairness, it's equity, it's all of the good and the beautiful words. It is the restoration of right relationships. It is shalom. But instead, and phonetically a very close word, God found tzedakah. Tzedakah is what God found. This is not just an ordinary cry of sadness expressed in that word. It is a word that carries profound emotional pain, involuntary guttural cries of depression, desperation, extreme injustice, trauma. This word is translated as a literal piercing outcry when human systems of justice have completely failed. God looked for tzedakah and found tzedakah. What is it that you are hearing? What is it that God is hearing from your city? Is it the cry of the Israelites enslaved in Egypt when God heard tzedakah? He heard pain. And we read in scripture that it literally is a cry that pierces through heaven. It pierces. It comes to God's attention. The other time we read this word is when it talks about the widow, the fatherless, and the orphan, and the stranger, when they are exploited. And I believe that God hears this cry when he sees the swathes of sex-trafficked people, when he sees the 100,000 children every year entering into the care system who have suffered trauma, abuse, and neglect for no fault of their own. God hears this cry when he sees the elderly so scared to leave their home that they are housebound, the refugee whose dignity is dying by the day because their difference supposedly makes them dangerous. The unemployed, disabled person who has something so profound to give your city, but who applies hundreds of times to jobs and hears nothing back. The suicidal dad who honestly thinks that his children would be better off without him. These are just some of the cries in our cities that God is hearing, the injustice that he is hearing, the disunity that he is hearing. And we, the church, the people of God, can change that cry. But we have got to reduce the silos, the egos, and the logos. I don't know who came up with that little trio, but I love it. We have got to reduce how these work. Consider the modern crisis, just of youth violence or severe mental health on our streets. You don't need to look far to see somebody who is in a complete psychotic breakdown. And also look at how disunification works. The school knows a teenager is acting out. The GP knows that the mother of the teenager is in a dark depression, partly because she cannot control her children, and partly because she probably was never parented herself. The intergenerational trauma in our cities is profound. The youth club down the road on the estate knows that that young person who's acting out at school is a target for county lines. And the church down the road is half empty, but has got some willing volunteers. And as was said earlier, makes good tea and coffee. But they do not talk. The GP centre, the youth club, the church, they don't talk. They don't talk because data protection is used as a shield rather than a bridge. They don't talk because budgets are so fiercely guarded in silos. Say families, we lost a contract the other day. In North Links, 100 families. 100 families lost their support literally overnight because a spreadsheet said no due to a change in political movement. And as a result, the teenager is excluded from school, the mother is left isolated, the street becomes a crime scene, and the church is still half empty with willing volunteers. Disunity creates blind spots where our people, those that we've been given corporate responsibility of, are swallowed whole. The pain of our cities is not due to a lack of resource. It's due to the fragmentation and disunity of placing the right resource together. We need the police, we need local authority, we need the housing teams, we need the children teams, we need the adult social services, we need foster carers, we need healthcare workers, we need food banks, we need drug and alcohol and addiction services, we need the youth clubs, we need the therapists, and my gosh, we need the church. My gosh, we need the church. A few months ago, a children's frontline social worker said to me, I will believe in God, she said, if yous Christians get your act together. You can tell probably where she's from now, though I'm not going to try and do the accent. If yous Christians get your act together and work with us so that we have one telephone number to call yous lot on a Friday night when emergency placements come in for foster care and we've got nowhere to put them. I will believe in God, she said, when I see you lot working together. She said, because instead, my only phone number is the police station. And we have children in blankets in police stations across this country on a Friday night. It's supposed to be for a few hours, and they are still there 3 days later. What if we were genuinely to address this disunification and begin to help undergird the goodness that is so required in our city by coming together as the church? But more than that, coming together with every aspect of civil society. Church A has the toddler group, Church B has great youth work, Church C has the food bank. You add all of those things together, plus all of our civic and statutory services, plus men and women of other faiths, plus men and women of no faith whatsoever, plus everybody from a different nation, tribe and tongue. Then we have a city that can be unified. And then we have a city whereby we can see righteousness and justice. But my gosh, it takes self-awareness. It takes laying down the silo, the ego, the logo. It takes integrity, as Roger was saying, curiosity, people first, values, vulnerability. My family, Jesus looked over Jerusalem and he wept because we were not prepared to gather. We weren't prepared to look at what it would take to make it work for the city. And it broke his heart. And today, Jesus is looking for a collective body willing to stand together. And if my name, your name, somebody else's name never, ever, ever, ever gets heard, it doesn't matter at all. If Jesus can be willing to die on our behalf in order that shalom could be brought back into the human race, what is it that we need to put down? What pride internally do we need to put down? What sense of I need to be seen as the person doing this within my city needs to be put down? What sense of I don't care what my church is called needs to be put down? Whatever it is that needs to be put down, we have got to do and stand together. We can only change the cry of our city when we stop pointing fingers at the council, at the government, at other churches, pointing fingers at other leaders, pointing fingers at those who we say, if only they did what they needed to do. No, no, no. We have been handed the baton of corporate responsibility for our city. We need to extend our hands to one another in a trusting dance. Let's build a city where the social worker doesn't need to ring the police station as the only option for care for children on a Friday night. And the examples I could give are endless. And it starts with the simple, radical questions to the person sitting across the sector line from you, from me, from us. What do you have that I need? And what do I have that will help you? And we are going to form a vision for our city that includes and involves everybody. We are going to ensure that our city has got a strategic prayer base to it. We're going to make sure that when we come together as leaders, we are not going to eye gaze how many baptisms that church has done one morning, how many new additions they've had this morning, how big their budgets are. We're going to stop doing that. And we're going to say this city belongs to God. We've been given corporate responsibility of it. We are going to bring unity by being the men and women of Christ that we are called to be. We are going to ensure that Aka is silenced and the beautiful life-giving song of Zed Aka begins to rise. Unity is not a luxury. It's a matter of life and death for these places that we love. Dan and the dance team are now going to come and offer us their part to play. They are going to give us a time now to reflect, to hear what God might be saying about our city, what our role in that might be. Where do we need to start trusting that somebody else could come along and do it with us? Where may we need to not abdicate or procrastinate? Where might we need to activate and not dominate? So that the glory of God be seen in unity across our land. Bless you.